Okay, good morning everybody and welcome to the latest in our running series of webinars on S4 HANA and the future of SAP. I can see there's quite a few people signed in already this morning, so welcome. It's good to see you signing in today. I'll leave the first slide up there for a moment longer just for the last few people to sign in, and also in case you have come into the wrong webinar, you can exit before we get into the detail. Okay, so I can also see that a number of you are completing the poll, which is great. Thank you very much for doing that this morning. I will share the results with you in a short while. Okay, so I think let's get started. Okay, so before we kick off, a brief introduction. I recognise a few names of individuals who signed in this morning, and I know several of you, but for those of you who don't know me, my name is Andy Steer, and I am the Itelligence UK Group CTO. What does that actually mean? It means I spend most of my time working with our customers and with our internal consultants and marketing teams and sales teams to make sure that everybody understands exactly what the SAP strategy and the SAP solutions are able to bring. So this presentation I'm doing today is a natural part of that, talking to you about SAP strategy and what they're looking to do, particularly around the S4 HANA solution. I've been working within the SAP ecosystem for, well, probably too long actually, to be honest, looking at that. And I've got a wealth of experience both on the HANA platform since it first got released to mainstream availability, but my background is also very strongly in data warehousing and analytics. And if you want to contact me, I will give out my email address later on in the presentation, but also feel free to chat to me on Twitter if that's a medium that you like to use as well. Okay, so before we get into the detail of today's webinar, I had a poll open and I was asking some brief questions, a couple of quick questions for you before we got into the detail. Really, this is just to help me understand the kind of mix of people that we've got on the call more than anything else. And looking down through it, I can see most people have put an answer in there, but there's a few people still putting some answers in as we speak. A couple of people just started as I gave a quick nudge then. So generally, it looks like we've got probably about half of the people on the call have got some very basic knowledge of HANA. Probably the other half saying that there's no real knowledge of HANA, so that's fine, that's good. And then when we look at the mix of HANA and your organisation, well, slightly over half of you saying that there's no HANA in your organisation at the moment, and then probably a quarter of you saying that you're planning on looking, and another quarter or so saying that you've got proof of concept activities underway, and one saying an active project. So that's interesting. So what I will do is I will leave the poll open for the rest of the session, so that if you want to, you can provide your answers as we go through. Okay, so back to today's session. Right. Unlike SAP's single slide 4-point font disclaimer that they give before their presentations, we've got a slightly simpler one here. A couple of things for you to bear in mind as we talk through this morning's session. Of course, please don't be afraid to ask questions. There is a chat window if you want to raise questions or you want to raise them through the Q&A panel. Feel free to do that. If we have time, I will answer the questions at the end, but if not, we will write them up and reach out to you with answers after the session. From a disclaimer perspective, the information I'm going to impart to you today is based on my understanding of SAP's current roadmap and current strategy around the evolution of their products. Okay? And what I will be doing is trying to make it clear to you during this presentation where our views, that is itelligence, perhaps differ from what you might hear from SAP. because I think a key thing that we're going to try and do for you today is help you understand our view and our perspective on what SAP is saying. So please remember, these are my views. They are representative of itelligence in the UK and itelligence more widely, but I am not an employee of SAP. So, key objectives. Help you understand the messaging and the context behind S/4HANA, share some of the experiences and some of the challenges that we see, and hopefully help to give you some clarity on the next steps when you start to consider what to do with your SAP roadmap and your SAP strategy. So in order to tackle that, on the agenda, really I'm breaking it out into three areas. I want to talk to you a little bit first of all about what SAP is saying in relation to S/4HANA. Then I want to try and translate that and provide some context, and then finish up with some recommendations around SAP roadmaps. So let's get into it. Okay, so S/4HANA and the future of SAP. What is it that SAP are saying? Now, I'm sure for many of you, you won't have avoided the messaging that's coming out from SAP because they've been very, very active and they've been delivering a lot of strong messaging out into the market about S/4HANA. And what you may well have seen would be an event back in February of this year, where Bill McDermott, the CEO of SAP, stood up on stage and talked about the launch of S/4HANA. And there were some very big statements made during that session. You can see some of them on the screen now. The biggest launch in the last 23 years, perhaps in SAP's history. S for simple, 4 for fourth generation, and HANA for the in-memory real-time. Now, there was a lot of noise made in that launch session about SAP's new product, S/4HANA. And following that, there's been a huge amount of information coming out around the opportunities and the possibilities that S/4HANA can bring to organizations. And SAP has been very bullish around backing this up with some market adoption figures and some case studies and some references and some videos, which I would encourage you to look at and understand and potentially utilize in your internal conversations around S/4HANA. But there is a slight challenge to the way in which I believe and us at itelligence believe that the S/4HANA message is being put out. And I wanted to try and talk about that a little bit at the beginning of this session. So there is a slight danger here that there's a little bit of a mixed message being given. And in conversations I've been having with customers, there seems to be a little bit of a challenge around understanding what SAP are actually positioning here. So let's try and explain a little bit what SAP is saying. Now, some of you may recognize this vehicle. This is a Tesla. This is the revolutionary, all-new electric vehicle that's been developed and produced and brought to market over the last few years. And there's a lot of hype about this vehicle, but there's a lot of very good evidence from individuals who adopted these new vehicles that they are getting fantastic experiences and really benefiting from a different kind of motoring. Now, what's interesting is that there is one side of SAP's messaging around S/4HANA, which is almost presenting S/4HANA as SAP's Tesla. So it's new and game-changing, and something that can completely change the way in which you experience SAP as a current solution that you use within your organizations. But the challenge that I have with that is actually, I think that's a bit of a poor analogy for existing customers. And I know the vast majority, if not all of you who are on this call this morning, are existing customers using SAP. So I think this Tesla analogy is a bit of a weak one, because the problem here is it makes you begin to think that you need to replace your existing car. So, the systems that you've got at the moment, this gives you the impression that you need to get rid of those and re-implement and get something new on board. And I actually think that's created a little bit of confusion amongst customers that I've spoken to, certainly. Because, let's be honest, you've already got a car, and the car does a good job for you, and you probably spent a long time convincing people that this was the right car for you and that it could do the things that you needed to do. So it's not particularly helpful to now get a message that, hey, there's a new car that you might want to buy instead. So what I wanted to do in the next part of this webinar this morning is try to deconstruct this messaging and try and provide some deeper context around the positioning of HANA and S4 HANA so that it makes a bit more sense for existing customers. So at this event in February, it wasn't just Bill McDermott who spoke, it was also Hasso Plattner, the founder, one of the founders of SAP and the technical driving force behind a lot of what SAP has done. And Hasso's presentations and Hasso's words were slightly different and a slightly different inflection maybe than Bill's. So Hasso was talking about a long-running effort to rethink the way that enterprise software on-premise could work, based around a potential for a zero response time database. So how could that impact and affect how we utilize software? And his view was that if you could bring this together, what you can deliver is amazing. So I wanted to step through with you this morning, just briefly, how SAP have invested phenomenal amounts of money and evolved their solution around this platform called HANA. So as Hasso said, HANA was an internal development project that was running for a considerable amount of time based on a lot of postgraduate research that was being done in various institutions that Hasso Plattner is involved with, including the Hasso Plattner Institute, some very high-level universities in the US, and also the research facilities within SAP themselves. And the premise was to try and re-engineer and redefine the next generation of business applications. And my first involvement with this, I suppose, starts back in 2011, when really SAP took the covers off of SAP HANA as a commercial entity and something that could be shown and discussed with the partner community and with the wider world. And this in-memory platform, as it was described, was really the culmination of the work that Hasso had been describing and the research that had been going on to try and take advantage of two real opportunities in the marketplace. The first one, which was hardware-based innovations, and the second one being software-based innovations. So, for anybody who's working in the IT sector, it can't be missed that over the last 10 to 15 years, the power of hardware has been increasing exponentially. I think a lot of people are familiar with Moore's Law. But we've started to reach the point recently where individual processors can't really get any faster. So we've hit the era of multi-core architectures and parallel scaling beyond the limits that we previously had placed on us. But the interesting thing was that most of the software that's being built to run on enterprise organizations really didn't take advantage of those hardware innovations. So the team that Hasso was working with, their view was, well, if we could write this platform, this database application, to take advantage of these new opportunities, things like row and column stores in memory, compressing databases, removing aggregates, all of these kind of things, we can produce a very highly performant system which would give us the opportunity to simplify the solutions that we deliver. So if you imagine a database that can respond so quickly that we don't need to pre-build aggregate tables, we don't need to worry about what questions the user will ask, that would give us a degree of freedom in the type of applications that we could author on top of that. And that was the essence of what began the path for HANA as a solution. So you may be familiar, if you've been studying this for some time, that the first real, genuine, wide appeal solution that was brought to market around HANA was Business Warehouse powered by SAP HANA. So the benefit here was that for existing customers who were running Business Warehouse, SAP's enterprise data warehouse solution, it was possible to change the way in which those solutions were delivered. So if we look at the diagram on the right-hand side of the screen at the moment, the center part of that diagram, where we talk about the layers where we bring data in from the traditional data feeds into a data warehouse, we're talking about disrupting this style of architecture by being able to bring in real-time data that doesn't necessarily have to go through the same modeling disciplines and can then be presented quickly to end users, bringing in traditional ETL data and blending it alongside our architected data marks to really change the way in which we deliver not only BW, but wider data warehousing deliverables. So this solution came to market and generated a huge amount of interest because it allows you to be more agile in the way in which you can deliver your data models within BW. It allows you to remove complexity around things like aggregates and performance-related entities that you put into your BW models. And that had a knock-on effect of lowering the cost of ownership of BW and also making it quicker and easier to answer questions that the business were putting to the BW team. So SAP evolved their so-called layered scalable architecture, LSA, to embrace these changes, now called LSA++. And this was very, very popular. Unfortunately, I think it wasn't as popular as it could have been because of the way that the HANA was priced at that point in time. So the software was pretty expensive, and the hardware appliances that you need to run on, the hardware vendors were charging a real premium for those application appliances at that point in time. So let's track on to the next stage in development. So Business Suite powered by SAP HANA. So this was taking the learnings of Business Warehouse, but saying, well, what if we put ERP on top of HANA? So the facts behind this. What are we talking about when we talk about ERP on HANA? So number one, we're talking about replacing the database at the back end, be it Oracle, be it SQL Server, whatever it may be, replacing that with HANA. And there are some benefits to that almost immediately. Clearly there are performance increases, but also we reduce the data footprint. So what do we mean by that? So I'd like to introduce a piece of data here from a study that was done by SAP themselves based on their own internal SAP implementation. So previously they were running their ERP system and it was 7.1 terabytes. So we talked before about this new type of database structure, this column-based database structure that HANA utilizes. So by moving to that structure, we can take advantage of increased compression ratios. So what does that mean in practice? It means that SAP's ERP system storage space dropped from 7.1 terabytes down to 1.8 terabytes. Now, possibly just pause for a moment and think about what that means for things like backups and restores and client copies and those kind of activities. It clearly gives you a different perspective and a different view on how you manage your SAP environment. That was point one. Point two, moving to the HANA database opens up more opportunities for us to improve the user experience. Now, I've never met anybody who utilizes SAP who hasn't been grateful for an improved user experience. So this is a very, very topical topic and something which many customers I speak to are very, very interested in. So I wanted to just take a moment here to talk about the two areas really that come when you migrate to SAP ERP on HANA. So really, the first one, there are over 500 transactions that are in your existing systems that you use that are optimized to run on HANA. Now, these transactions vary in the levels to which they're optimized, and there is a PDF available that contains a list of all of those transactions and the details behind them. And if you register your interest either during this session or after it, we'll make sure that you get a copy of that. But ultimately, we can also deliver extra capabilities to users that we wouldn't have done before. So on the left-hand side here on the screenshot, you can see traditionally the way that users interact with VAO5, for example, list of sales orders in ERP. Most customers limit the number of selections that their users can make in this screen, because if they let them select too widely and too deeply, it will slow down the interactions with their ERP system. On the right-hand side is the default VAO5 in a suite on HANA, so ERP running on HANA environment. And here we just say, look, you can query against and analyze on any of those data fields you want to, and filter them in any way that you want with immediate lookup of values, because we know that we can return those data sets very, very quickly because of the benefits of the performance from the HANA system underneath. So this is about a minimal disruption change to your users, giving them extra capabilities. But what if we want to deliver something a little bit further than that? I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Fiori initiative that SAP launched a few years ago. So Fiori, if you haven't heard of it, is it's Italian for flower, first of all. So there you go. If you haven't learned anything about SAP today, you learned something about Italian. And SAP has now released approximately 700 of these applications. Now, there are various different types of applications available, some of which are pure transactional applications, which will run on traditional non-HANA-based ERP. So employee self-service, manager self-service, those kind of activities are available to you right now if you're not running HANA. However, if you are running HANA, then you have the opportunity to access the widest range of those Fiori applications. And these offer you different types of application screens which blend together traditional transactional activities and analytical data, so that you can be drilling down through a whole host of transactions in real time, spot a transaction which you are curious about or not happy with, and then very simply highlight that transaction and put the customer on hold or put the order on hold, if you want to, in ERP in real time. So these Fiori applications, along with the renovation of the existing transactions, is a key benefit to moving to ERP on HANA. Thirdly, the ability to change the way in which you action reporting and analysis projects. So let's just take a moment to think about this in more detail. So on the left-hand side of the screen here is what we very often see as the traditional data warehousing approach. Whether you're executing this using SAP BW or some other enterprise class data warehouse, this is typically the approach that you go through. You extract data from your applications, you put it through some kind of a replication engine, maybe do some transformations on it, then you model it for people to access, and then you deliver that out through reports, dashboards, scorecards, whatever it happens to be. And very often, that necessitates and introduces a delay in the data. So that data is no longer live. Now, many people, because this is the way it's always been, have had to settle for that. And in fact, a lot of organizations have implemented that chain of data solely to get operational reporting. Now, the opportunity with ERP on HANA is to change that and to break through that and bust through those preconceptions about the way that we deliver reporting and information to users. So we have the opportunity, as the diagram on the right-hand side suggests, to be able to do transactional reporting and OLAP-style reporting in real time from our application database. So directly from a system sitting underneath our ERP. And if you notice on the bottom of the diagram on the right, you can also bring in additional data sets into that platform to enrich what you have within core SAP landscape. So this gives you a real opportunity to attack and change the way in which you deliver BI and analytics in your organization. Now, if you aren't yet doing BI and analytics, clearly this gives you a much quicker way to get started. But if you are, and you have something that looks like the left-hand side, then the opportunity is there to simplify your current architectures and lower the cost of ownership, and perhaps deliver something new to your customers as well. So if we drill in a little more detail, what SAP introduced, which was a real, in my opinion, a real fundamental change to the way in which you can utilize SAP and deliver reporting, was the concept of HANA Live. Now, HANA Live is a collection of views, or a semantic layer, if you like, that sits on top of the physical tables in SAP ERP. And many of you will be aware of the fact that there are a phenomenally large number of tables within SAP. So these views abstract the content and collect content together into reusable components that are typically useful for reporting. And then we give you the tools and the mechanisms to build your own views and amend views and combine views to deliver real-time reporting off of your base transactional data, be that ERP, CRM, SRM, or a combination of them. So HANA Live is a real big opportunity for people who are struggling to do operational reporting off of their ERP, CRM, SRM solutions. So if you haven't looked at that in more detail, I would urge you to consider it, because it can make a real difference to the way you deliver your reporting. So, ERP on HANA. So those are the key real benefits as we see them. And there's something I want to make you aware of here. So there is an item that you can request from SAP, or if you're a itelligence support customer, we can help you with this as well. And this is an item called the Business Scenario Recommendation Report. So this is a audit-based report that looks at the usage of your current systems and then generates a nicely formatted PDF report that gives you an insight into how those three items above can impact your existing implementation of SAP and how you use it. So our support teams are geared up to running these and translating these and working with you to help you understand them. So I would urge you to either get in contact with your support representative or myself after this webinar if you want more detail, and we can trigger that and we can give that to you so that you can really gain some insight about how HANA can affect your environment. So, saying that we've got these three key benefits really, the next question that tends to come along is, how do you get to ERP on HANA? So let's start here. If you're running EHP7 on your existing database, then we're talking about a database migration to run ERP on HANA. Now, if you're not running EHP7, then it's probably worth me pointing out at this time the activity and the effort in moving to EHP7 is probably greater than the effort of moving to ERP on HANA in this first stage. So it's not something to be afraid of. And if you aren't considering moving to EHP7, then you probably should be, because there are some real benefits there to you. Now, it is possible to move from earlier EHP straight through to ERP on HANA in one step. But what I'm trying to explain to you is that the project and the efforts involved, most of the efforts will be around the EHP upgrade and the testing around that, rather than the actual database migration. Now, once you're in ERP on HANA territory, then you have the options, of course, to deploy the Fiori applications that we talked about, and to look at HANA Live and potentially embedding your BW system to gain the benefits that we talked about there. So that gives you some real benefits and some insight there on that process. But as I said at the beginning, this is a solution that has been available for a number of years now. This is not S4, this is ERP on HANA. So what do you have to change if you want to adopt this? Well, first of all, you don't need to change the front end of your system at all. You really don't need to. The backend changes a little bit, so we move the database, and it may be that the supported operating systems for HANA may be operating systems that you don't widely use at the moment, so that's perhaps something for you to consider. But the main thing you need to think about is reviewing your custom-built app. So there is a huge opportunity to refactor and improve the performance of custom code when you move to a HANA environment. And there are tools like the Code Inspector, etc., to help you make a decision about your current custom code. So that is an area that I would really encourage you to think about. Many of our customers at the moment who've adopted HANA or who are doing proof of concepts around HANA have seen huge benefits in refactoring some of their pieces of code and have really been able to strip out some of the previous complexity there. So that's SAP Business Suite powered by HANA, and that's been available, as I say, for a couple of years or so now. So again, why haven't lots of people flooded in and bought this? Again, really about cost. Yes, there's a maturity thing around the software, but in my view, I think it's very mature and has been for a period of time. Really, it was about the cost. It was costing a lot of money to acquire HANA, and the hardware was still being priced very, very high. So what next? SAP proved that the Business Suite could run on HANA, and they began to look at how they could optimize Suite to run on HANA. So the next stage towards the realization of Hasso Plattner's dream, really, of an all-new ERP suite running on HANA, was really to start to look at the individual modules within SAP themselves. And the first one that they attacked was finance, with the so-called Simple Finance powered by SAP HANA. Now, let's think a little bit now in more detail about Simple Finance. So first of all, Simple Finance delivers to us a reduced data model, rationalized code base, and a renewed interface for finance. What do we actually mean by that, however? Well, if we have the capability within the HANA database to give answers very, very quickly, we no longer need to have the inherent complexity that was in the existing database. So we don't need to store account balances and things like that, because we can calculate many of those on the fly. We don't have to generate current positions on things, because we can calculate them on the fly. So this allows us to begin to move away from not just a complicated database model, but also to move away from batch type updates, and also allows us to simplify our code, because rather than having to update all of these aggregate tables and balance tables that we had, we now just write the base data, and that base data is utilized to build out any of the other things that we need on the fly using HANA. So let's look at this in a bit more detail. So many of you will be familiar with this. This is what finance used to look like within SAP ERP. So we had the separation between the different document types, and we had a large number of indexes and totals that were built on top of that to provide financial accounting and management accounting. Now the issue here is that that level of stability that had to be engineered in there with all those multiple tables and all those complex updates meant that we lost flexibility. So we didn't have a great deal of flexibility around the way in which we process those items, and we certainly didn't have a huge amount of flexibility around the way in which we could deliver analytics at speed. So if we wanted to do complex analysis, we needed to push that data out into BW. So COPA being an example of that, where many people push data out into BW so that they can get the insights they need on their profitability. If we look at the Simple Finance model, however, we change things. We move to a universal journal entry, one single entry regardless of journal type, and all of the aggregations are performed on the fly. That means we reduce the number of tables that we need in the database, we remove the complexity of updating and managing all of those tables, and we go to a simple, straightforward journal entry that can be aggregated and analysed as we see fit. So there are a number of benefits that come off the back of that. Improving the way that you deliver your reporting, obviously, is a byproduct of this. But also, significantly reducing the amount of reconciliation that you need to do, and of course, bringing down the cost of implementing this on HANA, because you're reducing the amount of data that you have, and therefore reducing the size of the appliance that you need to run HANA on. So let's look at how this impacts. So if we refer back to our earlier SAP runs SAP example, SAP implemented Simple Finance on their ERP, and they lost another terabyte in size. So we went from 1.8 terabytes down to 0.8 terabytes. So again, a huge difference. Now, it's worth noting at this point that this was just Simple Finance. When Simple Logistics becomes available, they anticipate that that 0.8 terabytes will drop down well below half a terabyte. So we can really get a feel now for these compression benefits from simplifying through the data model and reducing everything that we store. So let's talk about user experience now. So business intelligence, we touched on huge improvements, the ability to quickly roll out the new BI and analytics tools available from the business objects table. But also, these new interfaces, using the Fiori design concept, the ability to deliver real, useful, insightful, managerial role cockpits that can be utilized by managers either on their laptops, on their phones, or on their tablet devices, when they're mobile around the business, while they're out of the business, to deliver key, immediate, actionable, and collaborative information straight into their hands. But what about the individuals who live in SAP and have to work with SAP every day? Well, we've got renewed transactional roles. So rather than having to jump through multiple transactions within SAP GUI or within NetWeaver Business Client, we consolidate those transactions into new role-based interfaces, pivoted around the types of activities that individuals get involved in. And there are some fantastic examples of improved productivity using these new applications in comparison to the old GUI activities. Activities like matching incoming payments, whereby in the traditional UI, we're talking over 2 minutes, and we're talking a very large number of clicks and multiple transactions and multiple screens. The replacement for that in the new interfaces being brought down to being less than a minute, 1 screen, 3 or 4 clicks. So a huge opportunity to change the way in which people experience SAP and improve productivity throughout the organization. So that was point 1. Point 2. All of this is no good if it breaks everything that we've got. So in order to be able to utilize Simple Finance, it's important that we don't break the existing interfaces, extensions, and reports that we have. So the way that SAP handle this is quite clever. In the traditional finance model on the left-hand side, we have these tables we talked about before, these balances, these materialized aggregates, etc. What we've done now in the new world, on top of the single universal journal document, is we've provided HANA views that are executed on the fly. So your traditional reports that you have and your traditional transactions can still execute against the new data structure by going through these views. So that's an important benefit. It means that you can implement Simple Finance modules and you can run them side by side with your existing transactions because they operate on the same base data set. So as I just mentioned, our third key deliverable and fact here is that we can deliver these new simplified applications as an enhancement to an existing Suite on HANA system. So this was Hasso's big play, non-disruptive innovation. Can we deliver it as a new module, something that can be delivered like an enhancement pack, something that can be pushed out to users to simplify the data structures and to provide the new interfaces. So these 3 key points and these 3 key facts about simple finance. So if we think about where we've got to at this point, what we have is an evolution of the way in which existing users and customers can run SAP ERP. The problem with that, though, and when we come back to our mixed messaging earlier on, is that analysts and investors didn't respond particularly well to that message. They wanted a new product, and they were very vocal about that. SAP needs a new product. SAP needs to be seen to be innovating. What is there for the new customers? What is there that's cloud? So, that's where SAP S4 HANA comes in, as we discussed earlier on. And really what I want you to take away and what I want you to think about here is if you're an existing customer, whether you're in a hosted environment or whether you're an on-premise customer, S4 HANA really is the natural conclusion of a long-running process of evolution within Business Suite. So it is the culmination of this simple strategy, creating these new modules which can be rolled out on top of your existing systems so that if you do all of them, eventually you would be running the next version of SAP. So I prefer to think of it like this. You've got existing SAP ERP. Let's call it a BMW 320 diesel, right? It runs for you. Lots of people have got it. It's reliable, consistent. You genuinely feel that you've got some class-leading capabilities in there. But sometimes you see other cars and you think, you know what? There must be something slightly better. There must be ways in which we can improve this. Now, some of you may be familiar with what BMW is doing. So they've actually introduced new engines. So this thing called the Active Dynamic. So this is a very new type of engine which could be ordered as an option on the new cars. But imagine if you could bring your car into the garage and into the itelligence motorworks, and actually we could replace the engine for you, and we could put one of those newfangled engines into your existing car. So it doesn't change the way you drive your existing car on first glance. You can use it the way you use it. You're used to it. But when you look more carefully, it's more efficient, it's more powerful, and there are some new capabilities that you can utilize if you wish to. So really, we think about it as being moving to Suite on HANA. So not going to the simple applications, but just going to Suite on HANA. Giving your ERP system a new engine. And that can allow you to do things like the analytics we talked about, deploy more of those Fiori applications, maybe simplify some of your architectures. But BMW actually, they have their own kind of brand new car in the Tesla spirit. Not a high performance one, more a city or a family car. They've got the i3. And if you think about the i3 being their version of what SAP say with their big S4 messaging, it's all brand new, blah, blah, blah. What we really want to be able to do, and what I believe we can do through this evolutionary approach, is actually move you from the left-hand side across to the right-hand side without ever changing your car. So this is the equivalent of saying, well, bring your car in and we'll change the gearbox. Oh, bring it in again and we'll put different wheels on it. Oh, bring it in again and we'll change the bodywork for it. Bring it in again, we'll update the air conditioning. And doing all of those things independently until eventually, just like Trigger's broom in Only Fools and Horses, 5 new heads and 10 new handles, you end up with a different vehicle. You end up with the new SAP. So for me, that's the route for existing customers. This is not a re-implementation. This is not throwing away everything that you've done. This is an evolutionary path through. So, things that you can't avoid. Yes, this is the next ERP suite, and it is identified on the SAP price list as being a new product SKU. Yes, it is HANA only. You will need to migrate. Yes, they are new applications and they are different. Yes, you do have support for your legacy. So what does that mean? It means you need to think very, very carefully about this. So when we look at our previous route, clearly the goal is to put the further simple modules on the end and deploy them throughout until you end up with an S4 style scenario, as indicated here. So what's available right now? Right now, Simple Finance 1.0, well, that came out September 2014. Simple Finance 2.0 is in general availability now. We have customers who are implementing it. Simple Logistics is scheduled for this year. So that's S4 HANA. So how do you go about considering what to do? Well, look, first of all, don't panic. SAP support statements carry on with ERP 6.0 up until 2025. Okay? So you are able to keep running what you run up until 2025. You do not need to be frightened about this disappearing. But you need to be aware that making no decision is actually making a decision. What do I mean by that? SAP is committed that all new innovations will drive through the S4 HANA code line. They will bring some new functions to the traditional customers, but most likely that will generally be technical updates. So what does that mean for you? That means that if you stay on the traditional model, which is not the strategic SAP model, as I've been talking to you so far in this webinar, the HANA platform is the strategic offering. What you will start to find is a gap in business value that you can deliver. So SAP will come out with accelerated innovations, and you will not be able to adopt those. You will probably have to develop your own code to try and deliver those kind of things to your business. That will increase the cost of running your ERP. And eventually, my belief, you will want to go to the HANA platform, and then your cost of migration will be higher because you've added extra code. So look, what if that isn't enough? There are a number of other things that you can look out for in your environment when you're considering whether HANA can help you. Think about your hardware that you run SAP on. Is it up for renewal? Is it up for refresh? Do you have performance issues? Are there things you can't do? Are people challenging you about real-time solutions? Are you looking at and wanting to implement the new SAP capabilities? But as I said earlier, make sure you run the business scenario recommendation report. Incredibly important to do. Now, I'm not going to talk all the way through this entire slide, but what I wanted to do by putting this up was explain to you that this is an incremental approach. Now, this is outlined as a single project, but you don't need to do that. You can adopt the technologies at the pace that you are ready for. And we have packaged services to help you all the way through those stages, as evidenced by this diagram. So what should you do right now? What's our recommendation? Well, actually, SAP are making it quite easy for us to draw a recommendation at the moment. And it's very simply this. We advise you, as soon as you can, to consider getting onto the HANA platform. There are huge benefits, as we talked about already, from the analytics, from the Fiori applications, etc. But if that wasn't enough, SAP are also putting some hard incentives in there. So right now, for 15% of your HSAB value, so what does that mean? That means the value of your SAP software, excluding any database software that you have within that. So for 15% of that, so if you spent £100,000 on SAP software, then for £15,000, you can obtain HANA licenses to run Business Suite and Business Warehouse on HANA. You get a 6-month maintenance holiday, and if you licensed your current database software through SAP, you can get cash back, 50% cash back on that original database purchase. Now that offer's in place, but that offer's been extended and added to with this additional item, the S4 HANA Foundation promotion. That means that for a short period, SAP are telling us, if you purchase the HANA runtime offer at 15%, you will also obtain licenses to run and deploy the S innovations. So the S4 HANA code, the new simplified code base, the simplified models, the integrated analytics, those capabilities you will get that software for free. Of course, you don't have to deploy it if you don't want to. And our recommendation at the moment is that you consider that, but don't think that you have to deploy it to go on HANA. I want you to make sure in your mind that you're clear that you can move to the HANA platform, as evidenced here, and be an S4 HANA customer without deploying the simple modules. You do not have to deploy them right now. They are new applications. They will take time to deploy. You do not have to deploy them immediately. So, enable for HANA now, set the right foundation, and get the benefit of obtaining the S4 functions now without necessarily deploying them. So, how do you go about building a business case? Right, number one, collect the evidence. I've talked to you already in this session about how you can do that. Upload your data, review your BSR report. Either do that by yourself, or if you're one of our customers, please do it with us. Actually, even if you're not one of our customers, we'd happily walk you through that report and help you understand the relevance. Use that to build out indicative costings to go into a business case. And we are more than happy to work with you, with the BSR, to build an internal roadmap briefing based on your real business case. Like we've done this morning, but tailored to you. And then if the jury's still out and you're not sure, we can take a detailed value engineering exercise, or we can undertake proof of concepts. We're able to host them as well, if you wish us to. So, I really want you to get the feel that this is something that is within reach. To give you an indication, hardware prices, they've fallen by approximately half in the last 12 to 18 months. So these solutions are eminently obtainable now by all sizes of organizations. Okay, so a brief recap. We started off and I talked to you about SAP's big bang, big launch of S4 HANA. And if you're a net new customer, then I think there's merit in that message. Yes, there is a pure cloud-based version of S4 HANA, but you know what? It's massively limited. It will not support your on-premise customizations. It does not support all industry scenarios. So if you are an existing customer right now, your options are on-premise or hosted. And if you're interested in hosted, as always, Itelligence are very keen to talk to you. We're a multi-SAP Pinnacle Award-winning hosting partner, so we have got some great propositions around that. But I want you to ensure that you remember S4 HANA is not only a cloud proposition. It is an on-premise proposition as well. We talked about the evolution of HANA and how it came to be utilized underneath these other platforms. We talked about the methods of adapting your existing implementation so that you can put HANA underneath it. I talked to you about our view and actually the original SAP view of incremental innovations. And we talked about how we can move from a standard on-premise ERP that you have now and move you toward ERP on HANA with the innovations that come with that, and then eventually adopting the simple capabilities at your pace. And we talked about a roadmap that would allow you to do that. And the key thing from that roadmap being, you can take the pieces you want when you want them. So you can purchase and procure the simple options right now as part of that bundle that's being made available and deploy them when you see fit. And that's the key message that I want you all to take away from today's session. S4 HANA, yes, it is the conclusion. Yes, it represents the future of SAP. Yes, it's incredibly exciting, and it will deliver massive improvements to organizations. It will lower cost of ownership, it will radically change the way that you deliver analytics and the way that you approach solving problems in your business. But please separate it from the equally, and if not possibly more value, early benefit of moving your ERP onto HANA. Because there are massive benefits there, and you can then adopt the simple innovations at the pace that you wish to. Okay. Thank you very much for listening this morning. If there are any final questions, I will take them now, but I think, looking at the list of questions that popped up during the webinar, I think we addressed most of them verbally while we were discussing. My contact details are on screen. If you want to get in contact with me to ask any questions, then by all means do that. But that concludes this morning's session. So thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you in the future. Thank you very much.